Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Compete Everyday podcast. Jake Thompson here, your Chief Encouragement Officer. And we're talking about things that stress you out. More intentionally today, I'm going to talk about anxiety, what it is and how we learn to battle it, because more than anything is focusing on things outside of your control and worrying about a future that hasn't even happened yet. Do you know that feeling? Have you had those days where you're just anxious? You have so much anxiety built up for you. We live in a society that prescribes Xanax, alcohol, you name the drug or pill of choice, and they all prescribe it as the only way to deal with anxiety. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't be taking. I'm not going to tell you what you shouldn't put in your body, but what I am going to tell you is how you should start looking at your anxiety and perhaps reframe how you approach it. Healthline.com defines anxiety as your body's natural response to stress. But more than that, it's a feeling of fear or apprehension of what's to come. You're anxious because you have to give a speech today in front of your company. Maybe you're anxious because you're stepping up to the starting line of your very first race or competitive event. You have so much anxiety because you're afraid of what's outside of your control. You're focusing on a future that hasn't happened yet. And the one way and the best way that we learn to battle anxiety is getting our focus off what's outside of our control, which is causing that anxiety, and focus on what's within our control, which is our attitude, our effort, our actions, and where we choose to focus. All over the world, people invest so much of their limited time, limited energy, limited just everything into worrying about things in the future that may or may not happen, and in focusing on things that are outside of their control that no matter how much they stew on it, they simmer on it, they focus on it, they can't change it. They may want to, they may wish they could, but at the end of the day, they can't change those situations. But they can change how they respond to them, where they choose to show up, what attitude, actions, and effort they show up to give with. So if you want to learn to fight back against anxiety, if you want to have a better control on those days that, man, it's just running wild, your mind's racing, maybe your stomach's in knots, I've been there. But the way we overcome those days and the way we fight back is learning to focus on what's within our control. Maybe it's breaking out a piece of paper and a pen and writing down, what do I still control? What am I worried about in this situation? And what can I do to influence it? Taking the time to actually identify what's within our control will help us pull our focus off of the things stressing us out, off of the things we're worrying about, off of the things outside of our control, and back into the present moment, which is what we can still do, where we still have control, we still have agency, we still have that power. It's going to help us better identify why we're anxious about certain things. Are we worried about stepping up in front of that microphone, speaking in front of our company or the school because we're worried about what other people will think? Are we worried because we didn't prepare for this moment? Are we stressed out about we may fumble over our words or mess up or go off script? What are we actually worried about? One of the ways we help fight the worry, one of the ways we prepare for those moments ahead of time is to do the preparation work. But you know that. We've talked about that. So let's get back to this moment in battling anxiety. Writing down what's still within your control. Writing down what worries you. Writing down what you still have influence over. Help bring that self-awareness about what's going on in your life. Second thing you have to do is start making a plan. What happens for a lot of us sometimes is when we feel anxious, we continue to just sit and stew on the things outside of our control. We continue to sit and chew on that worry. We let that cycle go over and over and over again in our heads instead of doing the work to change it, to refocus back on things within our control. And so when you're sitting and thinking about the situation, are you looking for a solution to the problem? Are you identifying the things that you can still do that are within your control? Or are you just sitting and wrestling and worrying about the things outside of your control? That's the differentiator between those that continue to battle back and overtake that anxiety and those that are overtaken by anxiety. The ones that learn to fight back start focusing on what's within their control and look for solutions to the problem. They're not just sitting and chewing on it, wallowing in the mess. They're looking for ways they can do what they can with what they have in this moment to battle back and get their focus on what's within their control. And then finally, going back to preparation, what do you do to better manage your stress? What are you doing to create space in your schedule or in your day to have healthy outlets to deal with that stress? For a lot of you listening to the show and watching this here on YouTube, it's working out. It's going to the gym. It's attacking things like the July challenge we're doing right now. You get into the weight room to relieve that stress, to let out some of that anger and emotion and just focus in on the workout. But we have to have other options as well besides working out. We've got to learn to journal. Maybe we need to talk to someone like a therapist or a counselor. We have to create spaces and places in order to get that anxiety out, to learn how to process and deal with it. So we get our focus always on things outside of our control, always worrying about things that are in the future that may never happen, and dial it back to the present moment so that we can focus on what we can control. And by doing so, take action with what's in our control to get past that anxiety and start being productive. There's a whole number of you listening today that have dealt with anxiety. I have dealt with a ton of anxiety in my life, and I know I have a lot of friends that do too, but just because we struggle with it, just because we deal with it, doesn't mean we have to lose to it. Anxiety rears its ugly head when we're focusing on things outside of our control, and we're worrying about a future that hasn't even happened. Practice bringing your focus back to the present. Practice identifying what's still within your control, and then taking action with it to improve your situation or your positioning. Just because you're anxious doesn't mean you always have to be. And just because you struggle with something now doesn't mean you have to lose to it. In fact, it creates a great opportunity for you to overcome it and then help show others how they can too. Get after your day, competitor. I'm cheering for you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Compete Everyday podcast. To join the Morning Competitor Club, text COMPETE to 972-945-9113. Use the code podcast to get 15% off any order at CompeteEveryday.com anytime. Until next time, keep showing up, keep competing. I'm cheering for you, competitor.